One question from this side of the room. Over here, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you to close.
Jim, could I add something?
We're almost out of time. So if you can make it really brief.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have a plane to catch at 3:30.
That's right.
So please bear with me. But at the same time, with respect to the question coming from somebody from L'Autriche, did he say? Well, with respect to the relation between G8 and then G20, I have to tell you this, which is that I was in Washington, D.C. in November 2008. And then on the day of the G20 summit, the first G20 summit, I was looking upon Washington Post, among other newspapers, Jim. I was looking upon the front page of Washington Post, local newspaper, local and metropolitan newspaper, I have to say. And then there it was this, which is that in this town, we are seeing history in the making. I mean, that's what I read in the front page of the Washington Post. And then it said, well, G20, the birth of which we are observing in this town, it is going to replace G8. I read it. And then I have to tell you this, Jim, which is that I agree with almost anything I read in the Washington Post. But at the same time, that day, I said to myself, maybe it is not going to happen. Why? Because G8 has, well, several decades of history, several decades of experience, and then it doesn't go too easily. Several weeks back, we had the pleasure of hosting Lionel Jospin, one of the ancient Prime Minister of France in my country, and then, well, we were sitting in a meeting, and then a large number of people were talking about this. G20, it is emerging, it's going to replace G8 one of these days, etc., etc. And then Lionel Jospin, as ancient Premier de la France, he said this, which is that, well, one thing you have to remember is this, which is that in the international community, it is very difficult to agree upon new international organizations, but it is even more difficult to dissolve it. So G8 will survive. That's what Lionel Jospin said, and then there's something I think we are going to observe. With respect to the second question, couloir de transmission, I agree with everything we heard from Jean David. At the same time, I have to tell you this, which is that the way non-G20 member countries look upon the relationship between G20 one hand and international organizations on the other hand, we should take their views into consideration, which is that, as Jean David said, when G20 leaders agree upon things, then they love to send it out to one of the international organizations. And then, as a matter of fact, from the point of view of international organizations, they love it to cooperate with G20. But at the same time, we should think from time to time about what non-G20 member countries of those international organizations think. What they think is, well, G20, they are bigger guys making important decisions behind our back and then impose it upon international organizations of which I'm a lawful member. I cannot accept this. There's that kind of view widely held among non-G20 member countries. And then that, I think, is the reason why, as I said again and again, outreach is important. Thank you.
We all live under the terror of a deadline. I know you have a deadline, an airplane to meet. The chef here has informed me that we have to have lunch. His souffle will fall otherwise. So I'm going to let Samir have one last word, and then we'll wrap up this session.
In French, somehow, if you hear what we have said, there is a tendency on seeing continuing the same scope that what has been worked on since the beginning. The G20 was established by the crisis, and the major question is, did the crisis end? Or we are still in a period of imbalances? Mr. Trichet yesterday said we should be humble because we don't control the mechanisms that generate at a certain moment a new crisis, a new imbalance, and why the things spread away everywhere. So the question is, did we finish with what has been to be done? One other remark that struck me was that somebody said that even if we applied Basel II, which was not applied, has not been applied fully, we could not sustain the crisis. So now we gave ourselves 10 years for Basel III. Could Basel III sustain the new crisis that we don't know how is its picture? So there are still a lot of questions on, let's say, the sustainability of the whole thing, the possibility of crisis, and also the emergence of discontent from the population. So it's easy to say from, let's say, a G20 meeting that this should be the policy. But each of the countries, even China, is having its own problems with people asking for more money, more social security. And of course, countries like Morocco asking where is the legitimacy of the G20 for its own problems. They don't feel represented by Saudi Arabia, for example, as a group in such things. So somehow it's ambitious what France has been putting in addition to the original schedule. Good luck, especially that you tackle with the third issue, a very difficult question, the reform of the UN. So good luck and thank you for both of you.
The voice of cold reality closes our session. We thank you all for your attendance and have a nice lunch.